Hey everyone, this is Paul Warren coming to you with a really cool interview today. I want to bring our friend Seth Rosenbloom into the room. Here he is. Hey
How's it
Seth,
going?
how's it going today, Seth?
It's going well. How about you?
Very well, very well. I'm just sitting here with my guitars and my dog, and things couldn't be better. So I'm going to tell folks about you right quick and how I know you. And you can tell me if I'm wrong. We met in 2009, right?
Sounds right. Yep, at the Guthrie and Matthias and Andy Wood. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think what's very cool about great players like yourself is that you know that there's always something else to learn. So when I met Seth, he was, as he just mentioned, attending an event that I hosted with Guthrie Govan, Andy Wood, Matthias Eklund. That was in 2009. So he came as a student for that, and then the following year was Tom Quayle and Andy Wood. No,
I
no,
think,
no. The following year
yeah, Timmons.
was Timmons and Andy Wood. Yeah. Then he came back again with Andy Wood and Tom Quayle. That's right. And so after that, after Seth had attended three years, we started asking Seth to teach. So Seth taught alongside, let me make sure I get all this right. I wrote some of this down. You taught alongside Andy Timmons, Andy Wood, Bumblefoot, and Ben Eller.
Yep.
Did I miss anybody?
No, I
think
think
so.
Yeah,
Okay.
and because when I first started coming down, I was, I think, 16 that first year, 16 or 17. So yeah, it's been a long time now. I mean, that's 11, 12 years ago now.
Yeah,
Longer.
so these were all summer guitar workshops that we were hosting at the Raleigh Music Academy in Raleigh, North Carolina. So anyways, that's where I met Seth and got to see him play and became friends. And then later, I've had the chance to see Seth play a fair amount because we've done some shows together. So I've seen a lot of his live performance, and I'm always blown away with the playing and the guitar tone. If you love blues guitar tone, it's awesome to watch you play. The other thing I should mention too is Seth has a huge Instagram following, and it's not just because he's a well-known blues guy. It's because he posts a lot of content, a lot of really good content. So if you want to check out some really cool stuff, I don't know, do you post daily or every other day, or what would you say?
I'm not super structured about how much I post, so I'd say on average maybe 3 times a week. But
Yeah.
there'll be where I post 6 times. There'll be weeks when I don't post at all. So it's
Yeah.
I'm not the most structured, but I try to keep it pretty regular.
Yeah, and I've noticed that for sure because I see it in my feed. So that's a big deal when you want to get 30 seconds of inspiration from a player you like. So that's very cool. So let's just dive right in. Tell us what you're currently up to musically. What are you doing? Are you getting back out there to play?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, doing as much gigging as possible. Most of it has been more or less contained to the Northeast. I live out in Western Massachusetts. Touring at this point has still been just logistically hard. Coming off the last year and a half, any of the international stuff is still kind of a headache. And even the US stuff, just with different restrictions in different places and with everything being still just so all over the place in terms of some venues seem to be scrambling to fill spots a month out, others are booked out a year because they pushed their whole calendar back. The first real tour dates I have are in March going down to Florida, and I'm hoping 2022 is pretty regular, but I've been gigging pretty regularly since about the start of the summer in the Northeast. So, within a 300-400 mile radius where I can go play the gig and then either be in a hotel one night and get back home. On top of that, doing a ton of teaching, both private Skype and Zoom lessons, along with having a new course out with True Fire, which was great to work with them and get that launched. So yeah, it's been pretty heavy on the teaching over the last year and a half, obviously, with at some points
Right.
being more or less confined to home, and then trying to, at this point, get the next record started and get that going, especially to try to align that for when the tour dates are really going again, to have something new coming down the pipeline.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I should have mentioned to everybody too that you're located in Massachusetts, right?
Yep.
So that's up here. It's above me. It's way up there.
Yeah, I'm in
And
Massachusetts, almost way up in Vermont, so I'm pretty far north.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, very cool. Well, I was going to ask you something about what you just said there, though. You said the shows in Florida. What were they? Are you talking like Miami, Tallahassee? Where are you talking about, perhaps?
All over. I know the schedule is still filling in. It's mid-March, but I know I'm doing the Arts Garage in Delray Beach, which is one of the big kind of East Coast Florida blues venues. Along with, like, last time I was down, I did the Funky Biscuit in Boca, and those are two of the big ones in that area. And then I know I'm playing a blues festival somewhere on the West Coast. I don't know if it's Tampa area or more south of there, but something there. And then I'm sure the schedule will fill in a bit more. It's still getting finalized, but just with those two dates, it's, that'll be the first dip into going on the road again and really getting back to touring, which I love being on the road playing for a different audience every night. So
Oh yeah, everybody needs that as a musician. There's no doubt. So I forgot to tease at the beginning too. I want everybody to know that Seth's going to teach us something here at the end of the interview. It's going to be a fairly short and sweet interview, so stick around and you'll learn something. So let me ask you one thing though. Tell me about your biggest musical influences. Not just, you hear a lot about guitar players. Which guitar player influenced you? But tell me in general, like musicians, bands. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a guitar player who influenced you and as a musician and kind of shaped what you do now.
I mean, I think the obvious first one, which I've realized more and more as I've taught more, was, growing up, both my parents were musicians. My mom ended up going into teaching early childhood education, but my dad was a performing violinist. And so much of the stuff that I care about musically in terms of touch and vibrato and making sure from a teaching standpoint that, and I focus on it with myself too, that my technique is creating the least amount of stress and really letting me create musically. A lot of that stuff traces back to my dad as a kid. Like, I still have, not that he's not still at my gigs all the time and stuff, but I still have some of those moments from when I was, an 8 and 9-year-old playing violin, of, make sure your thumb's relaxed, or, talking about great vibrato and stuff like that. So for sure, my dad in that instance. And then, I mean, overall, I think as a blues guitar player, it's B.B. King first, and everything is kind of at least a half step down from that. Like, when I go, and not half step down from that in terms of quality or anything, but just in my kind of blues hall of fame, it's like everything for me does really go back to B.B. King in terms of the phrasing and the vibrato and the approach, and I mean the singing too. So
Yeah.
I'd say probably biggest blues guitar influence. There's just, so much there, tracing back to the super early stuff of like 3 O'Clock Blues, where his playing is way more in the vein of a T-Bone Walker than it is what people associate with the B.B. King thing. And then you get, Every Day I Have the Blues, Thrill Is Gone, and on and on. And he just did it for such a long time and did it at such a high level for so long, and really evolved in his sound and playing and all that. So yeah, I'd say blues wise, B.B. King.
That's very cool. Yeah, I can definitely hear that influence in your playing. I mean, it's interesting what will draw people in like that. So I like to find out what the influences are because some people wear them on their sleeves and some don't. And it's sometimes it's really surprising to hear, you know. I can't say that I would think of that immediately when hearing you, but I definitely hear the influence, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so, you know, another question I like to ask great players is why tell us all one of your greatest weaknesses on guitar. And the reason I ask that, I love asking great players this is because we all know that we're going to learn something new, you know, next week and next month and all that. We all have things that we can always learn on the instrument to hone our craft. So tell us about what you would practice on, what you feel like is something you need to work on.
Entirely agree with that. I'll give you the two biggest over the years that I've had to work on, and one that I really continue to work on, and I think everyone should. First of all, my background was playing violin, so classical single note stuff. When I started on guitar, and for a lot of years, single note lines and lead playing came decently naturally. Don't want to say it was easy, but a lot of the knowledge I had from the violin translated over. I always struggled with chords. So chord voicings, rhythm playing, because you don't, you're never playing a chord more than a double stop on a violin. So you don't think of chords in the same terms. You don't think of chord progressions unless you're really taking classical arranging class and looking at the entire score. So I had to work really, really hard on my rhythm playing and chord voicings in general. I mean, I remember even at 16, 17, I guess 16, when I was in the process of auditioning for Berkeley, I didn't really know what a major seven chord was or a minor seven chord. That's just, I was playing prog rock and playing a lot of power chords and major and minor chords, maybe some sus2s, sus4s. But that was something I had to work on pretty hugely. And then the other for me that I continue to work on is just time feel. I think that 99% of musicians can always work on making their time better. And like a lot of improvisers, especially, and musicians in general, my tendency was always to rush. So, of just feeling more into pocket and working on becoming a bit more grounded and consistent in terms of time. That's the biggest one I've had to work on and that I continue to work on, because I think we all have those experiences of we listen back to something and it's like, oh, I rushed that line. It could have sounded so much better if it was.
That is my nemesis. Time feel is, yeah, that is really tough, especially if you well, I don't want to go off too far on a tangent, but sometimes when you work with a metronome, it doesn't always make you a great time feel player. You need to
No,
play with musicians.
you need to play with musicians, and it's also, I think, a lot of it is the metronome can be helpful, but it's about internalizing the metronome and making it where your internal clock is better. Biggest eye opener for me in terms of time was recording my last album. Josh Smith produced it, and his time feel is off the charts good. And was playing with an incredible rhythm section. It was Gary Novak on drums, Travis Carlton on bass, who are both just absolute monster musicians. And Josh really kicked my ass on making sure all the rhythm parts were just totally in the pocket. Not just sort of in the pocket, but that they were absolutely locked in. And same with the lead lines of really making sure that wasn't kind of mailing it in or half-assing it in terms of the time feel, but that it was absolutely on the money.
Yeah, this is so funny that you bring this up because one quick tangent. I brought in a student a week ago and we listened to a song, an original that he's written, and it had a really cool 5/4 groove. It's kind of a fusion sort of piece. And I said, listen to this. I said, it doesn't sound like it has any groove. I said, it just sounds methodical. I said, your feel is off in recording your guitar parts here. So let's look at it. And we blew up the wave files.
Yeah.
And we looked at it with the drums. And it was really just his intro into some sections was really just a little bit ahead of the beat. And I said, that's all it takes.
Absolutely.
We re-recorded it very quickly. Didn't take but 10 minutes. He knocks it out again. And he just mentally thought about it, playing, a tiny bit behind the beat. And it was perfect. And all of a sudden, you didn't even have to blow it up anymore. You could just sit back and listen. It had total groove to it.
It's absolute truth. And I mean, as I think we both know, it's that any ahead of the beat is going to sound like the nervous, the rush. If you're a little behind the beat, that's usually fine, especially in blues. Like if you're behind the beat, you listen to an Albert King and everything's behind the beat. It sounds awesome. It sounds laid back, really grooves. But yeah, my nemesis for years was time. Absolutely.
Well, that's really cool you mentioned that. Do you remember Tom Quayle's time feel class?
Yep.
I thought it was brilliant. It was so simplistic, but it was so spot on.
Well, one of the things that's very similar to Tom's approach that I've really adopted, and I've heard Josh do it too, I've heard a lot of people do it, is I remember probably my clearest memory from the Tom Quayle masterclass. And I mean, since then, I've spent tons of time with Tom, seeing him do it with tons of songs, is he took, I think it was some jazz tune, pretty complex in terms of the changes. And he sits there just with the chart in front of him and solos over it with no backing track, no metronome, no kind of timing basis.
Oh yeah.
And his time's perfect. And that's one of the things that I do. I'll sit there and start with just simple 12-bar blues. And I'll play rhythm through once to set up the groove more or less. And then I'll just solo over it. And I want it to be just as locked in as if I had a click going. And that's been one of the most important things in terms of, as I said, not just getting better with a metronome, but internalizing that beat better.
Right, yeah.
Internal clock.
That is so true. That is very true. So what is your daily practice routine right now? What would you?
I have never been a very structured practicer. And I gotta say, somewhat in last year and a half with just everything with the lack of gigs for the most part, it was not the most inspiring time for me to practice. I know everyone thought, oh, there's so much time to practice and work on things that you haven't worked on. And I was in that mindset for, I'd say, March 2020 till about May or June, because I had been coming off just an unbelievably busy 6 months where I was never at home for more than a week or two, which looking back was awesome. And so I was writing a ton, I was practicing a ton, working on stuff. And then once it became clear that, gigs weren't right around the corner, I didn't do a ton of practicing. And there were definitely weeks straight where, aside from teaching, I didn't pick up the instrument. I'd say in general for the last 5-10 years, I don't have a practice routine unless it's writing or working on repertoire in terms of adding songs to the set and learning those and really getting those solid. I just have the guitar in my hands a lot. I've never really been one that'll claim to be practicing 6 or 8 or 10 hours a day, but between teaching and just enjoyment and playing around the house, I pick up guitars a lot. I mean, in my kind of little office studio here, I have, I guess, 5 or 6 guitars lying around here. I have a couple in my living room. So, I'll be sitting on the sofa watching TV, have a guitar in my hands, but no real strict practice schedule unless I'm working on a specific thing.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the things you mentioned there is super important. That is playing songs, because I know there are great guitar players out there who practice 6, 8, 10 hours a day. But honestly, most of those is when they were teenagers, right? And they had the time to do it. But some of the greatest guitar players you and I have known are ones that just played a million songs. I mean, if you think of somebody like Ron Thal, I mean, and Andy Timmons, guys like that, they've played every song from every genre, you know? And I kind of doubt, well, I remember Andy Timmons mentioning that, yeah, he practiced and he would work on his scales and things, but nothing crazy. I think he just played a ton. And I think that's way more musical of an approach anyhow.
It's always been my approach. And I mean, a lot of the playing I do relates to improvising. Like I'll put on different changes, play over those. But in terms of repertoire, especially coming back to gigging, like I had to make sure that I still had the set that I was doing pre-COVID really fresh and knew all the lyrics and all the chord changes. I mean, it's amazing, year and a half where you don't touch a certain song that you wrote, how it can just absolutely disappear, and you really have to go back and woodshed it a bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, well, hey, why don't you teach us something today and learn us boys?
Sure. So this lick combines really two of my biggest influences, Albert King and Stevie Ray Vaughan. Obviously, Albert was a huge influence of Stevie Ray Vaughan, but it's a great lick to get from the second pentatonic box shape back down to the first. So if we're in the key of A and playing over an A blues, we're going to start up at the 10th fret and sound something like this. So it takes you back into the pentatonic, first pentatonic box shape. So I'm doing a bend, 10th fret on the E string up to the 12th fret, and then bending it again. 8th fret on the E, 10th fret on the E, 10th fret on the B, 8th fret on the E, and I do a little bit of a squeeze bend there from just going between the flat third up to the third. And then I play the 10th fret on the B string with my third finger. And then I'm going down, pulling off to the first finger on the 8th fret, and then sliding down to the 5th fret. So slowly the whole thing. And sped up. And the reason it works so well is if you've been soloing kind of up here in that second box and playing, I don't know, any of the... Then if you go to that lick, it transitions you back into all of your box one pentatonic stuff. Where once I get here, I can then go to... So it's a nice transition lick. Of a lot of people, I feel like me included, struggle moving up and down the neck this way. And that's a great lick to get from one spot on the neck back to somewhere that's very familiar.
Awesome. I love it. That's very cool. I love that. Well, I love the nuances in a lick like that. It's not you gotta show them all, because if you don't add those small little micro bends and things like that, it loses the flavor.
It does. And I mean, I always like licks that combine some bends, some great vibrato, and then also have some sort of movement to them. And that one, as I said, it's a great one to go from playing high up on the neck to a bit lower and transition between two positions of the pentatonic.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to wrap it up here at this point, but I want to thank you for joining us. And let me mention first to everybody out there, we're going to have links to all of Seth's stuff, whether it's his True Fire lesson series. Is it one lesson series on there right now?
One lesson series, yeah. It's 10 sort of my favorite blues concepts.
Okay. We'll have links to that, links to all of his socials. Everything will be down below the video here. And make sure you follow him on Instagram. You've got a pretty big Facebook following as well, I believe. Any other socials you want to mention?
Those are the big two, and then can always find all the tour dates on my website, SethRosenbloom.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Seth. We appreciate it very much. We'll see you soon.